Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 24 of Down the Pub podcast, brought to you by Wolves of Westminster. I am your host, Peter Simpson, runner of the Haryan Gláeddyv channel and contributor to Wolves of Westminster. I'm joined tonight by editor of Wolves of Westminster, Patrick Timms. Hello, Patrick.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. We are also joined by Wolves of Westminster contributor and contributor to various platforms, mainly Talk TV, Peter Barnes. Hello, Peter.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hello, very well, thank you. And finally, we are also joined by Wolves of Westminster contributor Simon. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, gents.
Good evening. Good evening. So, it's one of those weeks again where actually finally it is sort of more boring stuff. So this would be at the end of the pub night, I'd say. But the first thing we'll go through is obviously there was a big old no confidence vote going on over in Warwickshire for the youngest council leader that we have in this country, possibly ever, but certainly at this point in time, George Finch, who did actually scrape through it by one entire vote, which was mainly down to all the reformers voting for them, plus 6 Tories, with 1 Tory voting against, and the rest of the parties voting against, aside from independents went everywhere, but I know Restore, the 2 councillors there, abstained. So very good show from him, I have to say, and this was put forward by the Green leader, who basically took issue with George Finch throwing a few toys out the pram and nearly collapsing a rape gang case, I believe. So, but he's improved since
Quite
then.
a big thing.
It is.
To kind of get wrong. I have to admit. You know, as a certain part of me was like, okay, a vote of no confidence seems extreme, and then when you dig a little deeper into the story, you're like, actually, this is where experience, and actually, having people running local government who know what they're doing might be a good idea.
I have to agree with that. I mean, there's only so far that, he's 19 goes. Well, if he's only 19, don't put him in charge then. Having said that, he's he's not done it again.
I understand. I understand why they did the vote. I am somewhat glad he won it because if you remember, he did provide one of the most keynote photos of last year, as people my age would say it, which is when the sort of like doddery middle-aged council executive looked very glum when he won the vote to transfer the power over who has control over flags in Warwickshire Council. But yeah, it was very stupid. I have to say though, you're 19, you're leading a council. I do think he's quite impressive. I think he's done quite a good job. But it's one of those things where, as somebody in education, to me, it feels like the experience that he's kind of had to have so that he learns to never bloody do it again.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summation, really, is that, you've got to learn somehow, but we've got people with decades of experience running councils and they've made an even worse showing of it. So, maybe age isn't the problem.
It's more one of those from my point of view. You've got a couple of things here from a political perspective. One of them is that people who, you look at prime ministers, when they survive confidence votes, they still end up going within about a year or so. The fact that there's been one, the fact they've survived it, doesn't necessarily mean they're actually going to survive for very long. So just because he's won this one, and of course by such a small margin, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be there necessarily for all that long. With that said, I mean, I have to say, and we know that Peter S. is a very big reform supporter, all that kind of thing. And as we've said in the group chat as well, though, prior to this, who put in there? Who thought it was a good idea?
The British public.
Technically, yes. But who put him up for selection, not election?
Fair. Right, okay.
You see? Yes. You see? And they're doing the selection. The Reform UK Party is doing the selection. I have to say, I don't know who thought this was a good idea. I wouldn't have thought it was a good idea. However, I was at the press conference when he said the things that he said that have led to the subsequent revelations. Yeah, I was there. He was certainly no holds barred. He's definitely a very intelligent young man. That much can be said. He has a caliber of character. What he lacks, and I think this is what we've all been riffing on just by now, is experience. And that is very much to be expected. So, do we expect a 19-year-old to have the experience of a 39-year-old? No, we don't. So why have we then put them in that position? I don't think the liability, well, not liability, but the responsibility for this can be limited simply to this young man. I don't think that is fair. And what he's done is what a lot of people of his age and stage would have done, which is why you don't put them there. But with that said, I am led to believe that his record thus far in other matters of running the council has, as I think PTB you were saying, it has been telling. Not a lot less terrible than what you would expect from other
yes,
people.
Yes, it's what I call the new British standard. Not as bad. And that's basically what it is. And I mean, to be fair,
not great, not terrible.
Yeah, I call local politics, the local councils, the dumpster fire of British politics, because it's always on fire and nobody knows why, but it's always on fire.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, the acronym, not as bad. NAB.
Nabbing it,
which other people might accuse certain people of in certain positions.
But I do think it's interesting, though. Does this say that Reform are having trouble finding people? If they have to put up a 19-year-old kid? Where are all these business experts? Where are all these people flocking to Reform? That's what we were promised. He wants to pack a cabinet full of them. He can't find a local councillor.
Well, Peter, I will come back to you on that, because I think at a local level, there is a big problem with the funding, because I have a friend who's a parish councillor, for example, and he works at Big Four. So already, because he lives in London, he's basically in the red. Now, because he's a councillor, he's got to take a fair amount of time out of his week to do council work, and for that, he's not really remunerated. Now, the only people, from my experience, that tend to stand for the council are young local political officials who are already making money off of politics, and they don't really mind the extra hours because this is like part of their work, or it's local retirees. So you end up with councils where it's disproportionately people who are retired, and if you Reform, it's sort of 19-year-old bricklayers, effectively. So I
wasn't having a go. It was just more of a kind
people
of
that don't have real world commitments in a sense.
Yeah, no, again, for once, I actually wasn't having a go. It's just my tone of voice problem. But it gets me into a lot of trouble. But I do think it's interesting because you had the guy from Big Brother who was just booted out of Reform. Do you know the guy with the ginger hair? He wanted to run to be a candidate, got knocked back, and then he got booted out of the party at the same time because of what he said. I mean, there just seemed to be a bit of a problem here in terms of them getting talent, keeping hold of them, and also being able to weed out people. There seems to be it's not running very well. No party does this well, by the way. No one does this well.
I'll take that.
But I mean,
I was
considering how much Reform have got to do, this is the bit where we keep saying this. It's not that far to the next general election.
Oh no, I totally agree. I don't think kicking out I can't remember the ginger guy's name. I mean, I searched George something. Yeah, I mean, I searched up what he said, and it's just on a video explaining that. I don't believe anyone's inherently evil, so I used Hitler as an example, and he was just misguided. And it's like, well, you can't expect to be selected for anything if you say Hitler wasn't actually evil, just misguided. Given everyone knows about World War II. Go on.
Why is Sarah Poacher still a member of Reform UK?
Has she said that?
No, she said that there's not enough white people on television.
With the television thing.
She's done a lot of things, hasn't she?
And then you've got Lee Anderson, who puts his foot in it every other day. They seem to be protected, other people don't.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, one there is going to be a hierarchy of those things. Useful people will get away with more. However, I would also argue that what George said was not quite on the same level as Sarah Pochin saying. What I, by the way, have heard from my own family, who I would say are well, they're not left wing, but they are a bit more open, we'll say. So that's why. There's obviously there's obviously a line for what's too bad, but also there's a grey area there, and that depends on how useful you are to the party. Lee Anderson's a big use because he was the first one to go over and really got them on the map in Parliament, given he was the first MP. So yeah, life isn't fair.
That was the anniversary this week.
It was 2 years. It was 2 years. 2 years, and what a week! What a week! So it wasn't just this no confidence vote they won. They also won against YouGov, which a lot of people had things to say about. From what I understand, YouGov's publishing results were publishing results that were entirely on their model that took into account tactical voting. But this wasn't really comparable with other polls. So people were saying, oh, they're only 24% on YouGov when they're like 26 to 29% on everything else. So it's like, why is it 4 to 5% below on YouGov? This is why. And so they've had to start publishing the figures that make it comparable to other polling, which put them actually on 29%, and the Greens on like 23. So it's an interesting one, which was a big win. Which I saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, is it, should a party in waiting really be doing this?" It's like, well, we're not there yet. They've never been in power.
Considering how important polling was in the last general election, it was basically, all anybody talked about was the gap in the polling. I think it is very important, which is why we shouldn't talk about polling as often as we do. They're snapshots, they're not predicting tools. It's really irritating, actually. Most people don't understand how they're done. People go, well, no one ever rang me. Well, you're not on the list.
They only asked 2,000 people out of a million.
I know. No one's ever rang my house.
Yeah.
You don't own a phone.
Well, I never answer it, so that's why I never get asked. But no, I'd argue this was a very big win, and I think it's one of those things where Reform pushing it. Oh, why they're doing that? That's pathetic. And then when they win it, oh, it's not that big anyway. Both of those things aren't true. So I'll be quite defensive on that.
For me, it's always funny that Farage always loves a poll where he's winning, but the one where he's not winning, that one's fake. It's all fake.
I'm with Farage on that one. Yeah, but it actually turned out to be true.
But this is the one actually where it turns out true. I still have somewhere in this house. I've got I'll wait for Servation. Do you remember that general election?
God, which one was that? Yeah, I remember.
I think that was the Boris one. Boris. Yeah.
No,
the trouble is when you get to this kind of thing, it really, as we've already said, yes, it is down to a snapshot, but at the same time, sometimes they do prove accurate. So the thing to
most of them actually do prove out to be accurate when you average everything out. British polling is actually one of the best in the world.
We're very good.
It's just the problem is it's the number of people that turn out to vote is the thing they're not very good at predicting. So they get the right winner, but they don't get the right percentage win, if you know what I mean. So they always get they don't get the kind of the mass behind it. For some reason, they can't predict how many people are going to turn out, and I think it's the weather. It's why you don't have a general election usually in winter.
It is so true, isn't it? I think there was an election in the 1960s. It was one of the Harold Wilson ones where the weather and the World Cup actually probably influenced the outcome, which is so daft, but so true, isn't it? Because if it's a grim day outside, especially when you've got an election in the winter, grim day, winter, Tory voters aren't coming out, are they? Because they're all over 70.
Yeah, this is why people were very furious at Boris Johnson for having won the 2019 one then.
On the 12th of December, now I can tell you exactly what I was doing on the 12th of December, because my vote source has never worked. So it's never worked. So what I was doing was going out to places like, I don't know, Westons, somewhere like that. There's lots of Westons out there. But this is basically the one where old people go to wait to die. It's one of those places. Well, it is. And so, but So I was there with clipboards and paper sheets and a pen at the end of the. I say at the end of it, it didn't get to the end of it.
You know, still there.
Canvassing on the doorstep, you couldn't read because it was raining. You see, you couldn't read it by the end of it because the ink was running and all of that kind of thing. In the end, I got about halfway through it and then just came back home again and, back to the office and said, this is pretty goddamn pointless. Those were not the exact words that I used, but that was basically the sentiment. There was no point in me doing this, but this was all the whole kind. It wasn't even just VI stuff. This was GOTV stuff. I was getting out the vote, and how are you going to vote? Are you going to vote? There wasn't a lot of point in me doing it, and so then you end up with. Okay, that's a half-done job. Yep, sorry about that, guys, but there wasn't a very good way of me being able to do it. So, I
just thought that you just made a really good point. We don't ask that question. Are you going to vote? I feel like that's a good one to ask about now. We should ask it on the day. That seems a silly thing to say. But are you going to vote? I think might be a good indicator as to how well politics is doing. Do you think?
Well, I mean, Gorton and Denton happened recently, and that was relatively high turnout for a by-election, to be fair.
I think that's media attention, though.
Well, very, very much possibly. I mean, I know by-elections I've been involved in have been high for a by-election for councillor, which, by the way, is about 35%. So still not
I thought you were going to say 35 people.
Well, maybe in Wales, to be fair, yeah. But having said all that, I have to say on GOTV and canvassing, I have to say, Reform, when I was doing it with them, they all do it on an app now. You can do it with paper, but no, it was all done on an app. So unfortunately, unfortunately,
the Tories used to have a thing called Merlin. And if you remember that one, and I tell you now, that was not Wizard. I tell you, it was rubbish. Yeah, you always used to joke around that it was about as useful as that machine that did the lottery. Because that was called Merlin. But the thing is, this is actually really important stuff. So much of our electioneering is actually done by this data. And it's one thing that a lot of us had concerns about for Reform, actually, was they don't have access to this kind of data. There isn't any kind of Reform data. So it's they're kind of going in blind. It's a very difficult kind of way to do it. At least with the Labour Party, or that, broadly, you can make some kind of judgments on things. But the Reform base is so varied.
Well,
it's difficult.
I will say, I mean, this wasn't part of the agenda, but I may as well mention it. It's, Nige Pay My Bills. I entered that. Notably, what was one of the questions? Who did you vote for last election? Who are you voting for next election? Oh, this is just a way to get that data.
Yeah.
And I get 150 quid off my bill. They probably
also,
they probably
did.
To
get money. It's a way for them to get money. I think that was a big thing as well. So they didn't involve selling football shirts, which I still have yet to understand.
I've got one, so.
Of course you do.
I didn't buy it. My brother did. My brother, a Labour voter, paid £40 to Reform. Yeah, I know.
That's quite a win, then, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah. I have told him he's donated to Reform more than me in that case. So, he's not happy about that. But anyway, there's one more thing on Reform, which is obviously Kent County Council have now declared an illegal migration emergency because all of them go into Dover. That's in Kent. So there's way more pressure on them than everywhere else. It doesn't really mean anything beyond, this is the intention of where Reform are going. Plus, Starmer, can you please do something about it? Which he isn't doing much about. The Border Force chief resigned today or yesterday?
Today.
Today, yes. Which I think, as you said in the chat, Peter, why has he not been fired? Well, maybe
it's my big thing. I say it all the time. Yeah. Why have they still got a job? Why is anybody in the Home Office employed?
Well, quite. So that is a very good question. Hopefully, hopefully they do get to kick up the backside at some point. Hopefully after next election, but you never know. But yes, illegal crossings, we're getting to that point where they're all starting again because the weather's not terrible, which you get every year. And Smash the Gangs has ended up with, 13% higher rate of people coming over. It's just nothing feels like it's been done. Incredible.
Because nothing has been done. That's the reality. I mean, the Gold Command, the guy that's just resigned, was 4th choice. 4th. Nobody wanted the job because even on the first press conference, this guy said, it's not going to work. He literally said it. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. Like, they made a big song and dance about it. You know, they got Gold Command, all these fancy titles and all the rest of it. Anyway, this is a bit silly, really, because even he knew that what they wanted to do was not practical. And it's just ridiculous. And I also find it very sad that we don't have a deterrent. We just have bad weather.
Oh, that's
how devastatingly British.
Pretty reliable deterrent, to be fair.
700,000 to 200,000. It was not like the bad weather deterred like loads of people. The bad weather deterred most of a already huge group of people.
Do you think it just deters British people?
Maybe they're all stuck in Ibiza or Dubai.
Benidorm, yeah. Oh, that was a thing, wasn't it? Cheltenham in the sun.
Benidorm.
Yeah, so, well, with that, I mean, I don't think there's too much more to say on Kent. They've declared this, and it's a virtue signal more than anything, but what more can they actually do?
You do bring up a good point, though, that Kent is actually statutory bound over a lot of this stuff because of where it is, and they have had their budget savaged. I mean, I do feel sorry for the people on Reform who run the council there. There you go. I said something nice about Reform.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, somebody date and time it. It's really important actually because it shows that we're not giving councils the resources to do the thing they're there to do. We give them all this responsibility, we tie their hands and make it legal, and then the next thing you know, we don't give them any money to do it. And you wonder why everything's falling apart. I mean, you know, they say the definition of of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, I know you say clown decade. It's insulting to clowns at this point.
At least they're not insane. Yes, quite. Right. Well, I think with that we can move on to Angela Rayner's comments as well, where effectively she's pushed back against Shaban Mahmood, who, as far as I can tell, there's bits and pieces that are good, but it's things such as visa bans for certain countries, such as Sudan, along with, from what I can tell, it's little more than tough talk on illegal migration. I mean, what more can they do than deport them to France, which they've not done much of either? Remember that was a big story. Nobody talks about it now.
They reported journalists, not the actual illegal migrants the first time round. So they sent there were 2 journalists on the plane, and then the illegal migrant last minute got dragged off because of a legal challenge. So just the journos ended up flying over to Paris.
Yeah, I remember the picture of the journo pointing at 2 empty seats as well. So, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, this is about the internal battle within Labour. Do you try and fight for Reform voters who've gone from you, or do you try and get the ones who went to the Greens? And my opinion on it is, I think they're already doomed to fail either way.
Oh yes, it's because it's the Labour Party, so it's doomed to failure. So this is a competency question. But I will say though, I think a lot of people have got this story wrong. I actually think this Angela Rayner interjection is riding a wave, not creating one. I think that she's trying to remain relevant. I think she's somewhat done, because she's still yet to pay the £40,000 back. This investigation is lingering on. Then when she launched her leadership bid, there was a tax problem with that then. She's also the face of the renters' rights bill, the workers' rights bill, and the fact we haven't built any homes. And the Islamophobia bill. So she's Mrs. Popular across the nation to everybody. So I think this is her last-ditch attempt to actually be the leader. I don't think this is a kind of I'm leading the charge. I think it's a hey guys.
Have you considered she has a working class Mancunian accent? Because it works for Hannah Spencer.
Really? Oh my god.
I know. Well, I have to say, whenever I've talked to people in real life about Angela Rayner, all they really have to say is I like what she has to say. And so if
they understand it.
Quite. Which always seems to come down to she's a working class mank, and she says anti-racist things, if you will, which is what she's doing here. So this is playing to her base more than anything. Plus,
she's the left-wing Boris Johnson.
Oh, yeah, pretty much.
Very accurate, isn't it?
Yeah, that nails it. But even then, she doesn't have to be leader. She just has to coalesce people around someone she supports, whether that be Andy Burnham, very unlikely at this point, or
he's backed her. He came out and backed her.
He did,
on the reform, on the immigration things. However, did you hear what he said?
No, I did not.
The Keir Starmer should listen to the former Deputy Prime Minister. That is a rather signal for people to remember why she's not there anymore. He still wants that job. He still really wants to be Labour leader. And it's very interesting.
I don't see how he manages it. I mean, if he didn't get... Gorton and Denton was his best chance, really. I mean, 6th most left-wing seat, probably the most left-wing seat in Manchester, possibly. But either way, I don't see where he gets in now. I don't know a better Manchester seat for him. Well, a lot of North Manchester, probably. But, I mean, what does he do? I mean, who's the alternative as well? Because... I mean, I did read Jacuzzi the other day actually saying Starmer's might actually stay in because everyone's kind of lent on now Starmer's going in May. But because of what's going on in Iran, there's an argument that actually, because of the uncertainty, stick with the devil you know.
Where Jacuzzi are coming from, but the only criticism I have of that is the foreign policy situation has never been that salient in British politics. I mean, Iraq is the only other time that I can think of, and maybe Ukraine. I'm equally sceptical that it was Ukraine that kept Boris in power. I think the main thing that will keep him in there is the lack of an alternative, or rather the fact that Andy Burnham isn't an MP.
Well, that's true. Who do you replace him with?
Because if West Streeting is hated by the base, and Angela Rayner is too stupid to be selected by the actual MPs. So you kind of got a situation where... Well, no, the public won't pick her. The Labour membership are stupid enough to pick her.
That's true.
You know, you're in a situation where Wes won't get the votes and Angela Rayner won't get the votes for different reasons. So then you might end up with some like random centrists, probably from the MOD.
Lisa Nandy. I bet it's Lisa Nandy.
I'm leaving the country if that happens.
I'm joining you. I'd rather be in Iran. I'm just saying it.
I'd rather be living in Tehran right now.
Well, to be fair, it's interesting that one, isn't it? Because if that were to happen, if Lisa Nandy were to become the new leader of the Labour Party, it would be the first female leader of the Labour Party. And a lot of people would take that as a sign that, oh my God, we've had the first female chancellor of our party, well, actually of any party. And now we've got the first female leader of our own party. So that then becomes a question of, are we just navel gazing? Are we saying, hey, look at us, we can do diversity? Or does it actually mean anything for the country? I mean, Wolves officially adopts a neutral stance on this sort of thing, but I think from quite a lot of reporting that we could say, I can see you laughing, Peter, but I think most people would agree that the performance of the current Chancellor has been what might politely be described as suboptimal.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Well, you're very fair today.
I think he's too nice.
I'm a journalist. Okay, so what I'm going to say is, it's a shame, really, in a lot of ways. We have our first female chancellor. She is of the Labour Party. And sadly, it would appear that she's not turned out to do terribly well. Now, this is a shame. Just as if we were to have the first female leader of the Labour Party, and therefore also as Prime Minister, I think it would be a shame if she also turned out not to do very well. So, what we must do when we look at our political figures is we must not, I guess I've just spent ages talking about gender. It's not really about gender. It's about, how do we reconcile this with actual political performance, but not only political performance, but policy performance, and how policy is fed through. Now, the two main parties, they both have infrastructures that can feed policy through. If you're in the Conservative Party, you have the CPF, the Conservative Policy Forum, you have that. With Labour, policy proposals are laid on the floor of conference, which, and this is another area we should move to, well, not move towards, but, these are, the amount of U-turns that they've made, I think it's something like 35 now. So it's approaching my age.
I thought it was like 16.
Also, I don't think the U-turns. I think the watering down, we're still ploughing ahead with a lot of it. But there have been some U-turns. But, look at the farmers' tax, still exists. The workers' rights thing, still there. It's just not as bad. Again, I think this Labour Party is asking the nation to choose, would you rather be shot or hung? The outcome is still the same.
Why have you got to put it so eloquently?
Overall, they do stand for something in theory, but not in practice. Because if you look at what they've been trying to do, things like extending abortion up to full term and making that completely legal was not in their manifesto at all. I've just heard the groan from somebody there. That was not in the manifesto at all. Neither was the abolition of hereditary peers. So they have some sort of vague, sinister ideological motivation. When they try to do things like lowering welfare spending, the backbenchers completely revolt. And usually it's not over major spending cuts either. So there is a deep left-wing ideology to these people, but in terms of their ability to carry out more in-depth policy that goes beyond, we'll abolish the Lords and we'll make abortion completely legal, like we're in sixth form politics lessons again. They're not really capable of carrying it forward any further than that.
Well, would you say because of course you, as we know, you are of Polish descent, the Law and Justice Party that is currently in power in Poland, would you say that they have actually carried out what it is that they said they were going to do and been upfront about it?
Well, that's actually quite a similar situation, Patrick, because, well, first of all, it's not Law and Justice, it's Civic Platform, but the current coalition are a little bit in the same boat that Labour are, because all their coalition partners, they range from sort of Christian Democrat agrarians to the party in power is basically the Polish version of the Lib Dems, to the firmly left-wing Socialist Party. And the main thing that they couldn't get across the line was abortion. And they couldn't get across the line an increase in welfare spending. So it's kind of the inverse. In both situations, the base of the two parties is preventing them from actually doing any of the things that got them elected in the first place. With the Civic Platform, they were scuppered by the agrarians, who didn't want an extension to abortion, the re-legalization, basically, of abortion, and they did not want a rise in welfare spending. So both of them kind of screwed over by their own demographic in a way.
I see. Well, that's very interesting. And what it shows us is that I think we were riffing on this theme earlier, that different bases, some of your different bases can screw you over. So you can end up with
I think that's the problem Reform might end up facing if they're not careful.
I am looking that far forward in the future, and yes, I am somewhat worried about that, because there's certainly a problem with Thatcherite versus can't we just nationalise steel, please, factions, which I am doing my best to try and join up in thought, but I don't think it's simple.
I think the actual divide on a much bigger picture level is between the sort of restorationist David Starkey types, Robert Jenricks, etc., that want, the powerful House of Lords and the return of parliamentary sovereignty, versus people like Zero and Farage who want to just knacker the whole thing out and go for an American kind of executive power, external cabinet style of government. I think that's the main ideological divide in the party, really. I'm interested to see what happens with James Orr as head of policy, because I'm not 100% sure where he falls on that.
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm a radical centrist on that position, which is probably why I'm part of Reform. Just to quickly bring us back to Labour, though, I do have to say it has been very, very obvious for some time. Starmer's stuck. I mean, one, he's an NPC and doesn't make decisions anyway, which is a whole conversation for another podcast. But he is stuck between making the bond markets happy, making the voters happy, and then making the radical lefties in his own party happy. Which is why he just seems stunlocked from doing anything whatsoever. And I will just mention Simon did have to go there, so thank you very much for joining, Simon. But with that, what can he actually do?
Resign.
He's not gonna do that. I think.
No, I'm with you. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think we're stuck with this guy. You know, I genuinely do. But I will say, this is how he ran his leadership campaign. He said everything to every group. He said exactly what you had to do to win, and didn't think about what happens when you win. And that's a big problem. How he gets out of this is resign. There is no way out of it.
Well, I think I keep seeing a tweet that keeps being posted where someone said, Keir Starmer would rather see the Labour Party destroyed than resign himself, which certainly seems to be the direction they're going. But one more thing I want to say quickly on Labour before we move on is, why do people care that we've got female chancellors? Who cares that they're going to get the first female leader? We had Margaret Thatcher in the 80s for a decade. We should be beyond this, but
yes,
people do seem to care still.
Well, but the thing is, it's political.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. It's not about, you know, can a woman do a job just as well as a man? And yes, we should be beyond that point as well. But still, landmarks. I'm actually going to be a bit on the other side of the spectrum here and say what landmarks do matter.
Yeah.
With, you know, I mean, I don't know when we're going to get our first trans prime minister, but
I think we're past that point.
Do you see what I'm saying? You know, my point is, it's not so much that I give a damn either.
I'm not.
What I will say though is we have to stop giving terrible women the job. And terrible people in the minorities. This is I always say, like you said, Rachel Reeves has set women back in politics years, realistically. You know, because it's the same. I say the same about Liz Truss, even Theresa May. It's a competency thing, and then they get saddled with the stereotype of a bad female politician.
Well, I kind of hate to say it because I was educated at a private school, but they kept showing off. Oh, this is the cabinet with the least privately educated people ever. Oh no, like people from Eton only, please. Then it's like that. That's the logical conclusion of that. But
the trouble is, you either get the one or the other.
Yeah.
That is the problem. You either get all of the Eton crowd or whoever, or you get people like the shadow front bencher, as it was first appointed after the last election, that have never run a business in their lives. Yeah. So. You either seem to get the one or the other. And when those of us who comment on politics, especially those of us who do it on telly, B2B, yes, there we are.
Yes.
You know, I think this is something to bear in mind. It's the element of saying maybe what we need less of in politics is the either or thinking.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we need less of that. And we also ought to, in account thereof, to encourage people to consider that maybe if what politicians are doing is, you know, their primary skill set isn't getting elected, their secondary skill set isn't getting re-elected, their tertiary skill set, if you're lucky, might just happen to involve being of some bloody use once elected, you know, well, this is not so good. And this is not to do with their gender or their sexuality or their anything else like that. It's not got anything to do with things like that. What it means is that we need people who know how the world works. And I think what we've got is a government and a cabinet that does not know how the world works. And that is the primary problem. It is not to do with their education or their gender or anything else like that. So what we then need to do is to say, well, why do we seem to keep electing people who don't have the capabilities that by all means they ought to have?
Because people with capabilities earn more money elsewhere and also don't get death threats.
True.
Yeah.
That's why I've always said that, you get the politicians you deserve. Not to be mean about it, but if you treat people terribly, good people will not go into that profession. It's why most politicians are a bit weird, because it attracts weird people. I'm just going to say it, and well-adjusted people go on to do other things in more successful areas. We also have a very bad habit of putting people on pedestals to kick them off. Why we do that in this country, I have no idea. We do it all the time. We love to elevate, then to tear them down. It's got to stop. And also, one thing you didn't mention on that list, Patrick, is somebody isn't a bad person because of their politics.
Sure, I agree.
That is a big one. You're not it's not more patriotic to believe in one thing or another, or it's not more, progressive to believe in this one or that one. We have to stop thinking that everybody is either a far-right fascist or a lunatic lefty when we enter in a debate with somebody or we enter into politics, just any kind of policy stuff, because that's what's killing it. We don't trust each other. We don't work together.
Yes, well, I completely agree. I will also point out that it is more patriotic to pronounce it as patriotic on this side of the pond.
It's the last refuge of a scoundrel. So there you go.
yeah, absolutely. But it's just one of my sticking points. But no, I think you're quite right. We do get the politicians we deserve, and then we have to think about ourselves, don't we? We have to think about why it is that we deserve these politicians. We have to think about the kinds of people who want to become politicians in the first place. We also have to think about, now, I'll give an example.
Like me.
Yeah. My rule is, if you wanted to be a politician at the age of 16, you're not going to be a politician. You shouldn't be allowed to run.
Yeah, I think my 16-year-old self will be shocked at what I'm like at 30, I'll be honest with you, so that's a good sign.
See, the thing is, I would look at someone like Frank Field, for example. I would say that he was an excellent politician. He's not of the same party as me, that doesn't matter. But I would say that he was an excellent politician, both locally and nationally.
Principled is the word you're looking for.
Yes, quite right.
Stood for something, defended it.
For 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of having a politician for 30 years now, let alone somebody having an opinion for 30 years, is more staggering.
Yeah, there are people who keep their opinions, I will say, for 30 years or so. I mean, I have noticed it in my own opinions, especially with the subject we'll get onto later, because I've always seen myself as pretty libertarian, but these days I wouldn't say I am. Despite the fact that I do have many leanings that way.
I'm not sure anyone knows what it is anymore.
No, I mean, I'd never call myself libertarian or classical liberal, despite the fact I think they're both fairly accurate because of the people that it describes these days.
It is interesting, isn't it? I'm meeting Steve Baker in his parliamentary office.
Yeah, good lad.
In Portcullis House, and that's how he described himself to me. He said, "I'm a classical liberal."
Yeah.
So, and I thought, okay.
And then there's an interview of him saying that humans we shouldn't live in a world of democracy because of God, which I did find out. I think he said that when he early in his MP career to the Catholic Herald or something. But
yeah, he's an odd duck. As my mother would say. It's a bit of an odd duck.
It's one of those where what I would say is, at the end of the day, we can all have contradictory views.
Definitely.
Yeah.
just as we can be contradictory people. I might do this in that situation. I might do that in another situation. What it's going to depend upon is could even be down to what's gone on today. And I think that's, if you don't mind, I think that's an interesting point to bring up. We do need to move on, but I think that's an interesting point to bring up, that when people have gone on the air as a minister or a shadow minister or something like that, and they have, to use the Hillary Clinton phrase, misspoken, I think I look at that and I think, you've had a bad morning, or whatever, So, but the trouble is, it goes down on the record, and once with the press in particular, and once it's down there on the record, it's there on the record. It can be found today, tomorrow, and be found in 10 years' time. So, especially with today's technology. So what we then need to do is to say, okay, especially with the rise of AI now, I find myself increasingly thinking, we hire humans, not robots, and I want to be governed by humans, not robots. And so therefore...
Oh no, we've got Starmer as Prime Minister.
We had Theresa May. We keep voting for robots.
Yeah, it's got to stop.
And
then we voted Boris Johnson, and he was a human, and he was the worst thing.
We voted for a clown. He behaved like a clown, and we were shocked.
Well, the thing is, he was human.
He was.
And that's why people like it.
That's why people still like him. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
I'm personally, I think that I like Mr. Farage. I've interviewed him a couple of times. I like him a lot, but what he certainly is human. Although the trouble with it is, and I will shut up in a second, but the trouble with it is, being in politics turns you into a robot, because you have your press team, you have your comms team, they might be the same one, you have the messaging you're supposed to put out there, and then, assuming you're party in power at the time, number 10 comes along and says, you're supposed to say this.
It's
now
because we have politics by focus groups.
Yeah,
we don't lead. That's what it is, in my opinion.
The whole point is that it compresses your personality down into, I'm just a messaging machine for now. That's what I'm supposed to be. That is the totality of what I'm supposed to be. So then you get all this fakeness, and people say, oh, politicians are very fake. Well, no, they're just being overly managed. That is part of the problem with this stuff. And what Reform is going to find, if it does get into power, is that the same thing will happen again as well.
Checking.
Yeah,
definitely. No, it will do.
But also, it's because the public changes its mind every 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got to try and keep up. That's the thing. I always say a lot of the problems we face are actually the public's fault, because we don't pay attention to a lot of things, and then when we do, we pay attention to the wrong bit, and we obsess over the really small bit and not the massive thing. But yeah, a lot of it is because we don't have principled politicians where they do everything by focus group, and it's instant win. Instant win politics that Alistair Campbell brought in has sank us, because we don't strategize. We don't have long-term vision for anything. You get through the day. For this government, get through an hour. That's the thing. And because of that, things like industrial strategy doesn't happen, which is why you had the migrant crisis, which is why everything spirals out of control, because you just try to tread water and not sail.
Well, I think that's actually an excellent analogy, and I like to consider myself an expert in analogies. But treading water rather than sailing, yes, that is very much correct.
Well, I think at this point, given that we ended up on that topic about 20 minutes more than I thought we would, we'll move on to some defections that I believe, not that they've happened yet, but I know Peter B wants to get onto this topic. So we've got, what is it? Greens possibly moving over to... No, Labour, sorry, MPs
Labour
moving over to
moving over to the Greens. Yeah, crossing the floor to an unknown bit of the floor. Although there are Green MPs already, aren't there? So yeah, but it's interesting actually, because this is the real rumor that's going around SW1 in Westminster. It's not actually who's going to be Labour leader. It's will the Labour Party make it to the general election? Because we thought that, you know, the kind of explosion of the Tories and that crumbling down was kind of, a once in a lifetime thing. I will say that but the fall of the Labour Party is going to be somewhat of a nuclear kind of fallout thing. It's going to be like Chernobyl, because everything is scorched earth, because it's so personal. I was on the terrace the other day with some Westminster people, and everybody was talking about this. We were with a couple of Labour MPs. I don't know why we were with them. They just kind of turn up. You say their name 3 times, like Bloody Mary, and there they are. And yeah, they were genuinely like, oh, is they going? Are they going? In all their WhatsApp groups, this is what they're talking about. They're not talking about Starmer or Mandelson or, you know, the economy. They're talking about who's doing the loyalty game. It's exactly the thing that happened to the Tories with, you know, is Jenrick going? Is Swen Suella going? This kind of high school drama is sucking up actual parliamentary time and actual working hours more so than it really should. And I think that is a big problem, considering, you know, we've got a war on. I get to say that now. It's quite nice. But it is interesting just how this one by-election has fundamentally changed British politics. It's dictating our foreign policy. It's every other party is, you know, repositioned itself realistically. And now we might have defections because of it. And it's one by-election. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'd argue it's a little bit more than one by-election. There's also a lot of council ones, plus there was Runcorn last year, plus May the 7th coming up, to be fair. Which, to be fair,
yeah, of course, yes. So it is part of a move. I will say that. I'll give you that. But, you know, we always say you can't judge off a local elections, you can't judge off a by-election. These are like the rinse and repeat lines that you use. Yeah, but this time, you know, it's amazing how that one little constituency, you know, that most people still to this day can point to on a map, is dictating a lot of national politics and international politics.
I will say I'm an exception to that because my brother got married in Gorton Monastery, but still, I'm happy to be the exception. Having said that, been around Gorton and Denton, obviously canvassing for reform. God, I think I saw 3 houses with Labour paraphernalia up. Everything else in that area specifically, it was reform everywhere. Not quite everywhere, but you know what I mean. And then if you were in the more Gorton area, obviously it's green everywhere, with the funniest streets are where you had kind of 3 green signs one side and then 4 reform on the other, and then you had a few little piece of paper with writing on it on some doors saying "No lefties, please go away." So it was quite mixed where I went, which obviously was, you know, two areas of Gorton and Denton. But having said that, where was the Labour support? It was kind of split between the Reform area and the Green area. There's a kind of 10 to 20%, probably a bit more given the results. But yeah, and bear in mind, 6th most left-wing seat in the country. Labour was safe by thousands of votes. I can't remember exactly how many. It's no wonder it's existential for them. Plus, I think Stats for Lefties put out their modelling for the North East today. Reform everywhere. I think Labour get 1 seat, Greens get 2. It's no wonder. It's not shocking to me that there are at least Labour MPs thinking of moving over, just as Tories were. Probably every Tory is.
But it's interesting. The number that was floated out was about 30. You know, it was 1 or 2 Tories. You know, you kind of knew who they would be, realistically. And yet now we're talking about a big chunk of MPs crossing the floor. If they do it in a big orchestrated way, I mean, that's quite the physical symbol. That's why crossing the floor is very powerful, and it's often overused. I mean, the SNP walked out every other day. It didn't mean anything by the end of it. But I think that, you know, probably would bring down Starmer more so than terrible policies, no economy, no growth. And this is what annoys me. If he goes, it's going to be something stupid like this. It's not doing a bad job as a prime minister. It's not keeping your party together. And it goes back into your point, Patrick, about why our politics is so terrible.
Well, indeed, and of course in the Labour Party, it's far harder to self-decapitate than it is in the Tory Party. By all accounts, I think we're going to have to wait until May, but it would seem as though I'm going to try and be a bit broad here. I don't think the Labour Party knows what it stands for anymore. With that said, I think the same can be said of the Tories, but at least they're trying. And, well, with the Labour Party, I would make the opposite point. I don't think they are trying to work out what they stand for. And the trouble with
number
that
10, yeah, number 10, yes. Angela Rayner, that faction, no. But I know what you mean. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's just one of those where I think the trouble is when you are in power and it's not very easy to decapitate the leader. Oh dear, we find ourselves in that position. But if I am an MP, a Labour MP, I'm a Labour MP. I've got a seat, I've got a constituency, I've got an office, I've got a job for a start. And another one I will probably have given up in order to take this one. And quite a lot of them will have given up other jobs, and then you end up where you are, and you're sort of, this is survival mode now. With that said, also, there is such a thing as having too many backbenchers. And I think that is a problem that this government is suffering from. It's got too many backbenchers, it's got too many people, too many egos, if I may say so. And, so then we get these backbench revolts, we get these U-turns, this is exactly what you expect. Now, one thing I will say for Boris Johnson, of course, different party, now he only had a majority of, 80 at first, I think it was, something like that. That's just about manageable.
Yeah.
To paraphrase from Theresa May, that's just about manageable. You've got a decent enough majority to get some very controversial legislation, as the stuff to do with Brexit was, through the House. But what you're not having to deal with is the kind of size of majority that Labour has at the moment. There's just too much opportunity for dissent.
And also, you have a very weak leader that isn't liked by anybody. They don't have their own mandate, not really. They obviously won the general election, but it's the loveless majority and all this kind of thing. He's not Blair. Blair stomped the general elections. He won in the same way that Trump won in last time round. It's like it was an undeniable victory. And I don't think you can actually run a political party on the basis of, well, he did it last time. He might win next time. There's no kind of loyalties. The loyalty bit isn't there, which is funny for politicians, really, when you think about it.
Well, perhaps less funny when you've met enough of them. But this is the thing, the Starmer. I don't think he ever expected to be Prime Minister.
You've said this before. How did he not expect to win last time? Or I guess you're going back to the leadership election, where he's with what is it? Rebecca Long Bailey, Lisa Nandy. I can't remember who else was up there, but I mean, you're the only man at the top of a short list of potential leaders, and they've never had a woman leader before. It's expect it almost, but. Aside from that, I sort of see what you mean. I mean, I think I said it last week. Why is he even an MP? Because Ed Miliband needed an Attorney General. He would have stayed at the CPS forever otherwise. And as I've seen about 4 articles on it now, it must be true. He just doesn't seem to have an internal monologue. I think it's as Oscar Wilde said, he's like a cushion. He's got the impression of the last man who sat upon him.
Oh, that's a great quote.
You're very welcome.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to write that
down. I hope you do.
What he means is he's going to nick it.
Oh, I know what he means. I know he's very welcome to it, because it is one of my favourite quotes.
To be fair, I did use your clown decade thing, but I did say it wasn't mine.
Oh, I need to see that clip. I need to see Haryanism in action. But either way, Yeah, we have a man in charge who, as we have all agreed on, and is the Spectator, the Times reported on this now, and plenty of others. It's probably known in Westminster circles now. He is a robot. He is an NPC. He is a man who just whatever the last thing he heard, he has to oblige with. How can you run a party like that? I don't know. This is why principled MPs are thinking of moving over to the Greens. But one thing I want to I think about is what about the ones that are going to lose to Reform? You know,
they don't matter.
They don't.
This big schism is going to be like pass the popcorn. I mean, it's going to literally make the collapse of the Tories, a bit boring, really, because it is. Do they go the Shabana Mahmood and actually, try to take on Reform, which is what people seem to think she's doing. I'm not quite sure why. And then do they go against the Greens and go to the left? And I actually think we might even end up rejoining the European Union by the time this parliamentary term is out. We're that far down the rabbit hole.
And I do agree, and I do wonder how much that helps Nigel Farage and Reform's position of these people just do not care about democracy. But God, I don't know anyone that wants to have a rerun of 2016. They
won't do a referendum. They'll just pass a piece of legislation and walk in.
Oh no, but that's the problem, Peter.
Yeah.
They do that. Yeah. God forbid, what are Brexiteers going to think? Because as much as Brexit hasn't been sunshine and daisies, and I was a Remainer probably up until about 3 days before the election, and I didn't vote because I was supposed to do a postal vote, but I was in Scotland for a month. Different story. God, I can see there's got to be uproar about that, surely. There's certainly a demand for, Reform, not necessarily. I can't even see Reform doing another referendum. Just we get in, we're out. Why wouldn't they do that? Run on that, because I know so many Remainers that think, we had that vote. Of course, we got to stay out, even if we get back in. Like get out again. That's absurd. We had.
I'll just share a brief story. When I was running as councillor in 2019, didn't get in as a award that's only ever returned Labour councillors. Wasn't necessarily the best idea, and also given that it was, it was the first opportunity the electorate had to punish the Tories for not leaving on the 29th of March 2019 when it was supposed to be. I am in conversation on the doorstep with now this lady. She was 63, Remainer, but said that we had a vote and so we should implement the outcome of that vote. And she said, I'm not voting again until this situation has been sorted out. And I said, I gave my position on Brexit, but I also said, look, I'm here to deal with the dog mess and the bins and the potholes. That's what I'm here to do. That's the point. By the end of that conversation, she was going to vote again, and she was going to vote for me because, as I said to her, I turned up. She said, I've heard nothing from anybody else. They've not turned up. They've not been around the doors. I've not heard from anybody else. So sometimes people, what we have to do when we talk about the whole Brexit thing, we have to bear in mind it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
we've aged terribly.
No, I know. But even back then, so this is only 3 years later. And it still wasn't sorted out yet. One can argue that it's not quite been sorted out now. But the point is simply to say a lot of people who divide around the lines of Brexit and leave and remain, they don't seem to recognise sometimes that actually for most people they've got better things to think about for a start. And now we're 10 years on from that. I think it's time for us all to consider that the various issues that coalesced around that particular event, let's just call it, as Penny Mordaunt would say, an event, right, rather than a process. I remember that article. It was a very good article by her. we now have to come back to the fact that actually that was some time ago, and now we have to work out how to implement what has been decided insofar as it has been decided, and that's another problem. Now, of course, what we then have is a government in power now that was never committed to it to begin with, and what they're going to do, this is the easiest way well, the word I'm going to use is stymie things in politics, is you don't come out against it as such. That's far too easy. And it causes you to nail your trousers to the mast. So you don't do that. What you do is just conveniently ignore it in public for as long as you can, while in practice, in private, you're doing other stuff behind the scenes to make sure that people don't quite know how it is that you're going to conveniently silence their vote. Now, that was always the goal of people like the People's Vote campaign. That was always their goal. Despite the fact that this is the other thing in politics, you make much of something. The People's Vote, they wanted another vote. But that was only their political ambition that they stated in public. Private, it would have been far easier for them to do things in the way that Starmer is doing it now. What a surprise. You see?
I just think at the time, I find it hilarious that you had a Remainer leading a Conservative Party and a Brexiteer leading the Labour Party, with Jeremy Corbyn being more of a Brexiteer, like a long-term one, than any other Labour politician at the time, and Theresa May backing Remain. I mean, how is this ever going to work?
Corbyn was very weak.
I did like the whole, if you just believe in Brexit, it'll happen. I thought that was dumb from Boris Johnson, but you do kind of have to believe in the principle of something to, push it forward.
It is worth saying that, left-leaning Brexiteers were not necessarily very much the same kinds of people as right-leaning Brexiteers. Okay? So I certainly do think, and I've said this on this channel before, but I will say it again, we are what we learn. We learn what we live. And what we live becomes our politics. So there are people who believed in Brexit for reasons that I would not agree with. There are other people who believed in it for reasons that I would agree with. There are also people who believed in Remain for reasons that I would not agree with, and other people who believed in it for reasons for which I can have sympathy. You see, it's just not a simple matter, and this is why a lot of people said that David Cameron's, the now Lord Cameron's decision to hold a referendum, they said, look, this is what we're doing is we're taking a very complex issue and we're reducing it down to a yes or no vote. It works in Switzerland, but people have said, perhaps that was not the best way to do it. But I think the reason they did do it, aside from the fact that the pressure from UKIP, that was very much certain, but also they might have thought that
they thought they were going to win.
Well,
that's that situation. You see?
Yeah.
Which doesn't make it ideal.
But I always like this line that it was because of UKIP. I don't think that's right. I actually think it's more Cameron won the Tories back into government, first majority since the 1990s. He won the Scottish referendum vote. He thought he could settle the European question. He was on somewhat of a streak, realistically. And I think it was arrogance more than anything, because if you go back to the Edinburgh conference where they set the rules of the referendum, it was the Brexit side saying that they wanted the thresholds and they wanted all of that. Remain said no. They were that confident they were going to win and win with a whopping majority that, they didn't even, actually think longer than their end of the nose. And, at the end of the day, they could have done with those thresholds, don't you think?
Thank God for the Westminster bubble.
It's an interesting bit, though, isn't it? Because
Don't tell anyone.
I've had conversations with my family about this. That ultimately, the side I come down on when it comes to the fact that Cameron resigned at 8:30 in the morning, as I recall,
yeah,
the next day. I actually respect that.
He had to.
Yeah.
He basically said the world was going to end. We were all going to get super gonorrhea. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do remember. I
vaguely remember that one.
This is the thing. I always thought he did it terribly. I know we're wandering off the subject, but he did it terribly by taking such a firm position. You know, like he could have just said, "This is for the people. The government can have its position, but I'll implement whichever side wins. Win-win."
And he did send out that leaflet, which I've still got in my memories drawer. Okay, as to that, but what I would say is, look, if you don't think you're the man to, we're all blokes here, so it's we don't know about carrying something to term. I think you know what I'm referring to. But if you don't think you can carry it to term, then go.
Yeah, don't linger.
Yeah, so I do respect that. There's the opposite position, which is that maybe he should have just stayed on, and he said, the leaflet said, we will implement whatever you decide. Okay, so some people would say, well, you should have stayed on and bloody well done it, mate. I get that. But actually, I respect his decision to step aside. A year ago, he just won an election, which he didn't even expect to win. I recall him saying that when he, this person went, that person went, the other person went, he thought he'd gone to heaven. That kind of thing. Fine. So now, because you have to bear in mind, they came into power with a coalition, then they finally won an outright majority, then a year later held a referendum, and then he goes. Because he, as it were, and I think to him personally, he lost it. So his decision to step down was, at least, I think, honourable.
Yeah, I think the whistling, if you remember rightly. Do you remember there was this big thing when he walked away from the podium but back inside number 10, he started whistling a tune, and there was a big thing in all the newspapers. What tune was he whistling? Not the fact that the Prime Minister had just resigned was the national news story. It was the tune that he decided to whistle. And it was like everyone was saying, it's the nonchalance, and he was just like, he's ruined the country and he's walking away and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, this is why we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, it's also for him. I think that is the mental health response. I do not accuse the present Lord Cameron of mental health issues, but I mean, anyone who's been the Prime Minister is going to have mental health issues.
To want to be the Prime Minister is a mental health condition.
Very good. Yes, I agree with you.
You can section me if you want.
Don't tempt me.
Even just being an MP, I mean, let's say you are, and then you lose the next, and this is only in local terms, the constituency election. You basically get publicly sacked.
Yes.
If you're Michael Portillo, people still call it the Portillo moment.
Poor guy.
You get
it's cruel. It's cruel.
I mean, I've been hired and fired. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give any more detail. What I will say is that I've never been fired in public.
No. No. It's a tough job. I don't envy MPs, to be honest with you. Even I only want to be one out of a sense of public duty. I'd much rather just be a kind of non.
That's weirder.
Well, probably, but I'd much rather just whinge to a microphone for my life. Well, I don't even do. That's a hobby.
Hi, do you know where we are?
Well, quite. But no, it's
he's
not
been on once already.
Well, true. But I mean, where do we get onto this? We got on to this from Labour MPs possibly going over to the Greens. I mean, the other question of that actually is how long is Zach Polanski actually going to last? Because I know I'm not the only person who thinks this, but he's not very good at standing up to scrutiny. And that pressure can get to you, and he doesn't seem prepared for it at all.
I mean, the guy used to tell women he could make their breasts bigger with hypnotism.
The
fact he thinks he could go into politics, I mean, the fact he thinks he's got this far is problematic as hell, if we're being honest.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Why has he got this far? Frankly, because what else have the left got? As much as the Tories won for 14 years, the left got basically everything they want. I say it on Twitter all the time. We live in Arabistani's world. You know, how high does tax need to be? How high does spending need to be? Where are we at as a culture? Well, that'll bring us into our next point.
Corbyn won the argument.
Corbyn did win the argument, as it turned out. I asked ChatGPT the other day, how much of Corbyn's manifesto did Boris Johnson actually implement? And it was between about 25% to a half, which is far too much, by the way, because that was a mad manifesto. It's not 100% sure. I mean, one of my bugbears, fracking, drilling the North Sea oil, because I did geology. We should have done that years ago. Now we're in a point where actually oil and gas kind of matter quite a lot. Oh, well, sorry, it's going to take years for that to get set up now. Well, we could have done that 10 years ago. So
America did it in 2003.
Well, quite, exactly. So, and what Zach Polanski doing now? They don't even talk about the environment anymore. What was Gaunton and Denton all about? Urdu adverts, plus dancing around on street corners. What do they have intellectually? Even Aaron Bastani is confusing. I don't know if any of you saw the interview, one of the first interviews with him and Aaron Bastani and Zach Polanski. Polanski sort of going on about immigration, how it's great and how it's our strength and what have you. Aaron Bastani, when he was on his sort of I'm trying to get the right wingers on my side arc, just looked like a really disappointed dad. He was there, arms folded, like, why are you saying this? Because they don't have anything else. And so this is where left-wingers are going. Starmer isn't doing it enough because he has to get with the right-wing voter base of, you know, the United Kingdom. So why not go to the party that's really saying your agenda out loud, quite blatantly as well, I'd add. So
yeah, and this is the fear, is that the Labour Party try to out-lefty the lefties and double down on it. That is a real fear I've got. If they pick Ed Miliband...
Yeah, I think that'll kill him.
Miliband. Oh.
Yeah.
I think you just made a very good point, Sir Peter B. That it's the doubling down. That's exactly what it is. And what you'll find is, as much as I decried earlier this notion of either or thinking, sadly, in politics, this is where it goes. You have two groups of people, the ones who will double down, or the ones who will, have the sense to, well, not do so, basically, So, and I think what we're seeing with the Greens, to answer your point, Peter S., to answer your point that, what are we seeing here? What we're seeing is the people who will just double down because they've not got anything better to do. That's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Versus maybe some of these, for example, there may be plenty of Labour members who are not going to come over to the Greens because they will not double down on that. They will retain their party membership. They will continue paying their subs, including possibly their double subs, which is a thing that happens, by the way. I know that because I am ex-Labour. You see, so there are some people who will say, okay, I see where you're going, but I'm not coming with you on that journey. Okay? I'm not coming with you on that journey because I am down, but I'm not double down on that journey. You see? So those are the bits of your voter base that you will retain. But if you're someone like Zach Polanski, which, to be fair, I mean, he must be in seventh heaven. He's polling, what, 17%? 18%?
Terrifying.
Depends on the poll. Sometimes it's as high as 23. So.
Yeah, so there we are. But the thing, but that's the other thing, and I will shut up in a second, I honestly will. But that is the other thing that happens to you, and I will say, Peter S., which you won't like, I think it's what's happened with Farage, with Yusuf, with others as well. You end up with Tice, for example, you end up high in the polls, and now you think I wouldn't say invincible, but now you think you're, the world is your oyster.
Yes. Yeah, they got complacent. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, definitely.
I think it explains the way that Polanski behaves. Is that there's a lot of that going on as well.
Yes, which is why I mean, I think I said this before. Mike Graham said it publicly, but I don't think he's actually going to last. Yes, he's done very well with their polling, but the Greens have two problems. One, what's their vote base? At the moment, it's a bit like Labour's problem in that it's a mixture of, frankly, more, well, not necessarily Islamist, but certainly that way leaning voter base, plus a whole load of lefties who are, your typical LGBTQ, IIA, whatever, society members who nobody really gets along with, we'll say. So where do you go from there? Well, as Zach Polanski, I guess you just keep going on about how working people need more money. Well, every party's saying that. So what splits you apart?
I hate to break this to you. I say the same thing about reform.
Listen.
All the headphones came off there.
Listen, we're having a go at the Greens at the moment.
No, it's not. It's actually a problem of transactional politics.
Yes.
We shop around.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not attached to it ideologically anymore. We're not ideological. We gave up on that a long time ago. It's what can you do for me this time round?
Well, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, there's certainly a problem with there's no long-term thinking anymore. I do agree with that. I'd argue Reform are trying to do that.
Can I bring something else in there?
Yeah.
Because of what we said before about loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the opposite sense of this.
Yes.
You see? There's the Shire Tories who are always going to vote Tory. There's the people, I'm having this conversation with, I obviously won't name her, the site manager at the school I worked at for nearly a decade. And I remember having this conversation. I can't remember for the life of me how it came up, politics. I remember her saying, I'm working class, I vote Labour. You see? So you have that as well. And so it's one of those where it really doesn't matter what they do. It really doesn't matter what they do, how terrible they are, whether in government or in opposition, whether it's if it's the two main parties, it really doesn't matter what they do. You know what your voter allegiance is. Now, for Zach Polanski, he's trying to establish a new presence.
Mm-hmm.
So is Nigel Farage with Reform, albeit, of course, on the opposite side of the spectrum. But it's just as with US politics as well. You have the Democrats and Republicans. You also have other parties. You have the Liberal Party. You have the Liberal Party. I didn't know about them because I don't need to. But it's one of those where you have the established parties, and what a surprise! We send our Puritans over there, and they develop an entire civilization that then becomes the world's largest economy. What have they inherited from us aside from common law, a common language, but also, what a surprise, we end up with a two-party system. You see? So when we have this kind of thing going on, we have to just look at the human condition, and as I've said before on this show, that that it's politics is basically the human condition on steroids, because that's exactly what it is. Well, then this is what we're going to see. People become tribal, and then new tribes come along, and they want to establish themselves. That is what Reform is doing. That is what the Greens are doing.
Yeah, that's certainly true, which I have no problem with, because I've wanted something like this. God, I've never been a loyal Tory, really. I joined them in, 2024? I was voting for them before that. I did it after Liz Truss was kicked out, ironically, because I thought, God, she was awful, but it's kind of direction we've got to go. And
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking, I disagree with you, Patrick.
Okay.
Now go on.
I think it's actually the reason the parties have collapsed is because voters became the same. Voters all want the same thing: good schools, safe communities, growing economy, jobs. It is about the delivery of that now. That is why Blairism never went away. It's because everybody became lower middle class essentially. It's why Cameron pitched himself as the heir to Blair. It's the continuation of that style, because we kind of put to bed the left and the right big arguments, or they went to the darker corners of the internet. And I think we're starting to see that coming back, because what we think has been the collapse of it is lack of principle. It's actually competency that has brought a lot of it down, realistically.
So would you say then that, because I do take your point, would you say then perhaps that Reform and the Greens are the new, sorry, my English is failing me, the new pillars, shall we say, of that which principle stands for in either direction?
No, I think it's a misinterpretation of it, because it's ideological. I think the people from me always know they don't really understand why the Tories lost. It wasn't that they weren't right-wing enough. It's that they were terrible. They couldn't fix anything. That's why the small boats crisis has crippled the Labour Party. It's a visual representation of failure. And I think that is valence politics is what they call it. And I think that is the big thing. You've got to look like you know what you're doing and be able to point at something and say, we made that better. The Tories in 2024 couldn't do that. And I think, and if you go back to the Labour Party under Gordon Brown, that's when everything has collapsed as well, because then nothing had got better. And I think that bit is where the Greens and the Reform Party fall down, because and I look at the right in general at the moment, we're all having these little skirmishes. People just want the hospital appointments time to come down.
Oh,
that's what they want. I think it's,
yeah,
I don't know, it just seems a bit navel-gazing to me.
No, I think Drupka Cunley on Twitter has described it as basically fineism. Yeah, people want their kids to go to decent schools and to have hospital appointments, things like that, and that's basically become impossible. I wouldn't put it entirely down to competency. I think, there's economic realities we need to deal with. If you can just go to hospital without paying for anything, A&E gets filled up. I've certainly seen that before. So there's certainly some there's certainly an ideological bent to it. I mean, the Greens are the Greens versus everyone else.
But this is what I'm saying. They've misinterpreted. They've tried to go back to the principal point. It's why I think Robert Jenrick was always wrong for the Tories, because he thought that Farage was right in terms of they just need to be more right wing.
That's true.
It's not. It's they need to be more pragmatic. They need to actually get something done. And I think that's more what it is. And I think it's when the Labour Party they could hold back in.
Would you say then that it's more a case of having some flagship policies that you can actually implement? And I think part of the problem when creating party manifestos is that, especially if they've been written by people who have actually been in government before, you quickly come to realize that there's very little you can actually implement. So what you then end up doing is writing what you might call perhaps a rather stale, rather bland manifesto that doesn't commit to anything in particular, especially if you're one of the main two parties, because you know that there's probably going to be bugger all you can actually do when you get in there in the first place. I think I will say, I think Kemi understands this, Kemi Badenoch. I don't think Sir Keir Starmer understands this.
No.
I don't think Zach Polanski has the faintest idea of how to do politics.
Where he is, what he's doing.
Well, he's just an actor. He's the worst type of politician.
That's what politics is.
No,
I mean, I would say of all of these people, I think they ought to get BAFTAs. They really ought to get BAFTAs. Because that is a large part of what politics is. I will even say that for Sir Ed Davey. He certainly seems to be putting his effort out there for stunts and
aren't they on 9%? I mean, he's kind of killed the Lib Dems.
My point is that he does at least. With that said, I think what he's done is because people have criticised him for too many silly stunts, which I understand. I mean, yeah, there are too many silly stunts.
I don't mind that.
What he's done,
I think it's terrible.
What he's done is he's lent into the notion that this is all make believe anyway. And you see, so you have some of that, and I think his voter base has as well. It's more, and again, you have that voter base, which is whatever, guys.
Yeah, I think he understood that to win very well in the last general election, he just didn't need to say anything. But when you're losing your deposit in an era of protest politics, and you're the natural party of protest, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I think he's the next one to realistically go. I think he'll go before Starmer goes.
Yeah. All three of the big ones will probably go in 3
the Holy
months'
Trinity.
Time. Let's not be blasphemous. With that, though, I think we've got to about an hour and a half now. So although we didn't get to the last topic, it was... I basically put it in there in case we ran out of time, which, as it turns out, we didn't. So there we go.
That's my fault, oh no.
Oh, no, it's not a problem. It was a great conversation, as always. So, thank you very much, Peter B, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And with that, thank you all very much for listening. And until next time, goodbye.